Welcome to Advocacy Talks, a podcast from the advocacy team at Vision Ireland. Here's what's coming up on this episode.
Increasingly, since I became a president, we've been looking into OSCE, which is the Organization of Security and Cooperation, because they have human rights work as well. And they've been working in terms of disability inclusion. They've been working in particular on accessibility to voting and into political life. And that's really interesting because especially the voting aspect has been something the VBU has also been working on.
And now, here's Madeleine McNamara.
Hello everybody, Madeleine here, and thank you so much for listening to Vision Ireland Advocacy Talks. In our last episode, we marked the European Mental Health Week, and I was joined by Peter O'Toole, who is Vision Ireland's Head of Counselling, Wellbeing and Emotional Support. And we had a fascinating conversation about the important role that policymakers can make to help to improve people's mental health. So it's really worth a listen. So do go back and check that out if you missed it. Well, today I am delighted to be joined by Tytti Matsinen. I'm sorry, you'll have to tell me how to pronounce that properly, Tytti. I've made a mess of that. who is the current president of the European Blind Union. So before we kind of talk all things European Blind Union, I wondered whether you might just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Tytti. I'm from Finland, as mentioned earlier, at least in some background discussions. I'm 38 years old, a civil engineer and a theologian by education, and working at my local university in the business school administration. So I have a day job, and then all of these European and domestic human rights activities are a life-giving hobby for the time being. I'm a mom to a 5-year-old boy, and I have quite a long history in NGOs, working also in NGO sector before joining the university a few years back. Roughly over a decade back, I spent a year in Northern Ireland, in Ballycastle, County Antrim, volunteering. So that's also something that's behind me. And in a few weeks' time, I'll be traveling to both Dublin and Belfast just for a holiday after a decade of a break. So
wow. Oh, that's amazing. Yes, I heard you were coming over and I was hoping to meet you, but as I'm unfortunately on my holidays at the same time, so we're going to miss each other, which is a shame, but yeah. Oh, I hope so, absolutely. Well, honestly, but looking at listening to all the things you've been doing, it's such a varied background. As you say, civil engineering, and then I saw you did a master's in theology and social ethics as well. So you're a very educated lady. Lots going on there.
It's always been me being into all kinds of things and going to multiple different directions.
So when you did
throwing stones and that type of things. I think it's also healthy to follow the world and not just look inwards and stay still.
Absolutely. So when you finished your engineering, you didn't fancy being a civil engineer at the end of that studies? That wasn't where your passions led you?
I started studying and then I drifted towards volunteering, and then I started studying theology. So initially after school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I applied to different places and started with engineering. And then sort of after the first year already thought that maybe this is not something for me as a career, making a lot of money and doing hard business stuff. So I applied for theology then. That was also originally the second alternative. But then instead of going to the entrance exam of the university, I ended up on an interrail across Europe and reapplied to university the year after. But then I had some eye health trouble at that time. So it was mostly on a sick leave for a year in my early 20s, and then did a bit of studying, and then ended up in Northern Ireland at that point. And after that, I was sort of half and half committed my time in different kinds of volunteering and NGO activism activities, and then studied on the side. So I've actually been working full time since I think 2016 or so, and then finished all of my degrees on the side of studies. So not the most traditional story that looks like.
Yeah, well, I think it's so fascinating because that's one of the really positive things I think these days is that there are so many ways to get to something. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's no straight path, is there, in life? Where it was always twists and turns. You mentioned there about having some issues with your sight, and I was just wondering,
Mhm.
were you born with a vision impairment, or is that something that developed later?
I was born with the genetic condition, and I lost my left eye when I was 8. So in the end of my first grade of school, and then it was quite still and stable for over a decade, nearly 15 years or so, before I got into trouble in my early 20s. It's something that runs in the family. So my uncle is totally blind, and my granny got similar stuff after I lost one of my eyes. So it's very much in the family, and my son has the same condition. So it feels like a family story, and I think that's been part of my luck that there is such a strong connection to the world of being impaired in my family. So when I've had my troubles, there's been support and understanding around. But then on the other hand, um, I've also been asked to do the same stuff that everybody else does. So I have not been cushioned, into some kind of protected corner of the household, but I've managed to do all the things that other children do, and been let go of some duties because of my disability.
Well, that's really positive, isn't it? Because as you say, it's fantastic that you have been pushed to do all the things that everyone else in the household is doing and not being treated any differently. Helping to make you independent and able to participate fully in society.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have challenges? I mean, because engineering, I would imagine, well, there's a lot of maths in it. I know that, but other than that, I mean, how was that in terms of accessing the studies?
I did my engineering degree is in industrial engineering, so it's a business degree with the twist of technology in it. And I did most of the techie stuff in the beginning before I had the bigger eye trouble. Would definitely struggle with some of the schoolwork now with this vision that I currently have. At that time, it was mostly fine. The good thing was also that the university was quite small and agile, and I think engineers in general have this kind of results and solutions oriented thinking that when there was a problem, there was really good also from the administration and from the university side that we'll just sort it out and we'll figure out how you can do this. So I sort of got this feeling that it's not only my responsibility to figure out when challenges arise, but rather it was a joint effort and a joint push. And then after I lost more of my sight in the early 20s, I mostly did the text-based stuff at the studies at that point. And then the theology degree, on the other hand, was very much based on lectures and reading and
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Great to hear that you had such support from your university. So really, really encouraging. And just in terms of, you mentioned that you're living and from Finland, and in general, what is it like, and how much support is there for people who are blind and vision impaired in Finland?
I think in general there is quite a bit. The university is not the body is supporting, but you get your support through either through the National Pension Fund in terms of the IT assisted devices, anything more expensive that you need for work or studies, and then it's sort of every day, it's like magnifiers or white chains and that type of stuff. You typically get through the health services, so your local health center, regional hospital, rehabilitation unit there. And then what we have in Finland is personal assistance. So based on your need, you'll get an assessment and then an allocation of personal assistance hours. So I have one for work, 40 hours per month, then I have 30 hours per month for free time and leisure activities, and then 15 hours per week for the kind of daily living and household stuff where I need help. I rarely use all of that, but it does come handy. I own 50% of a car with a friend of mine, so we both are single moms, so we're just figuring out that we can also share a car on a week basis. So I have a car every other week from Tuesday to Monday, and then my assistants have a driver's license that makes, for example, grocery shopping a lot easier. And you can go to a bigger supermarket together and do the shopping with somebody who actually sees what we're looking at. Although I must say that my son is 5.5, and he knows how to read. And even though I don't, of course, use him as an assistant, but we can do quite a bit together, independent.
Yeah. Yes, no, absolutely. I'm amazed. I know that our listeners in Ireland will certainly be jealous because getting access to personal assistance in Ireland is pretty difficult. So it's absolutely amazing to hear about the level of personal assistance that you can get in Finland. I know here, people do get, some people can get hours, but it would be very limited. So to hear that you can get such support in terms of, both for work and for, the social side of life as well, which is so important, because being able to access, not just shopping and that kind of thing, but also going to social events and just participating in society like everybody else.
Just in a very rural community, about an hour away from home, and there would be absolutely no way of going because I get some taxi travel as well, but that's restricted to within the city boundaries or within the next neighboring cities. But this one is sort of one town away, so it's not covered by the taxi service. So that's the way for me to go. That I have my car, and then I have my assistant. 8 hours. We drive there and stay for the time that I want to stay, and then drive back. So it does give a lot of independence, and also makes it possible. For example, the EBU activities, because it does include some travel, and I always travel with the assistant, and then I can use my energy and my capacity to the actual meeting, the content, and networking, and things. But I don't have to spend energy on sort of logistics and how do I find to places, or if there's a buffet meal. Where do I find the food that is suitable for my diet, etc. So it does save a lot of energy.
Oh, 100%, I can imagine, because I'm low vision myself, and just the anxiety around traveling, particularly to unfamiliar places, is quite high. So being able to take that away, and as you say, to focus on the important work that you're doing when you get there is amazing. I know that we'll certainly be pointing towards Finland in our future advocacy in terms of trying to increase the availability of personal assistance here, because the difference it makes, for you compared to people here who are so restricted, particularly in rural areas where there isn't very good public transport, and so the ability to get to their local town even can be very challenging, and just not able to participate in society in terms of community events and things like that. So it's amazing.
It does make you very dependent on neighbors or friends or family, and sometimes that's fine. But if that's the only relationship you have to people around you, it does give it a weird twist.
Yes, and not everyone has that. I mean, in my situation, I have a husband who's very supportive, but we don't have a lot of extended family close by. So it's very difficult to find that support, I suppose, when you need it. And people do support when they can, but people have busy lives themselves, don't they? And you don't like to be a burden on those people, I think. So being able to have that independently, it was amazing. Absolutely.
I think it is more and more available. If I'm not mistaken, I think Poland has the personal assistance as well, and I think Slovenia has it, but the system is really new still. So I think it's sort of slowly creeping in, but then I think there's also some cultural differences and how busy the social services all in all work, how are they built, probably depends a lot on that as well. But I do find it very useful. It does come with some, as all systems come with some kind of costs, and it's not always equal. Of course, some municipalities try to restrict. For example, the assistants are entitled to have additional pay if they work evenings or nights. So then some municipalities try to say that, well, you can only use like in my original decision that I got from my social worker, it said that the everyday or daily living hours you can only use between 6 a.m. and 6 in the evening. I'm like, well, I take my son to daycare, then I will work 8 hours at the office and then I go pick him up. There's literally no way I can squeeze in a 3-hour shift for my assistant between 6 and 6. Working from 8 to 4 and then doing all the daily logistics in both ends.
Yeah.
So sometimes you do need to battle quite a bit, and then there's different ways that you can access the assistance. What I've chosen is that I'm the employer. It's the social services or the disability services who then pay all the costs, but all the sort of employer responsibilities in terms of work health care or shift planning and recruitment and all that business is on my shoulders. It does give me the freedom that then I'm able to give longer shifts, for example, when we travel. But the lighter version would be to get this voucher from the disability services and then use the voucher to buy the service from a company. That would then be the employer. But I need sort of have a limited choice when it comes to who the assistant is, or if you even have a permanent one, or if it's a different person coming at any time. So the system has some peculiarities for sure, but it's definitely enables a lot of independence from any persons with disabilities.
Absolutely. But it sounds like in some ways it's good to have that sort of choice of, taking the full responsibility yourself. And maybe for some people that might be too much of a, challenge maybe. So having the other option, which, yes, as you say, does have its, more restrictions in terms of, getting consistency of the person and things like that. But for some people, they might find that, just easier than having to organise it all themselves. But
depends a lot on the need as well. I travel quite a bit to need to use business, and then if I go, for example, the European Parliament, I need to have somebody who I know that does, first of all, is not stressed out because of international travel.
Yeah.
But then also somebody who knows sort of intuitively has a way of behaving in the correct manner.
Yeah.
And then I attend a crafts club once a week for the evening. So having an assistant who is skilled in different kinds of crafts is quite essential.
Yeah.
So that I can get the help that I need. With any detailed work that I can't see, or if there's something that they need to describe, it's easier for somebody who understands what we're doing than for somebody who's not a crafty person at all.
Yeah.
It does then end up me having, I have not an army of people working for me, but I have a bunch. All of them work very, very part-time. Some do one shift a week, and some do one shift a month, and some only travel with me. And so there's quite a bit of that logistics, but then it helps to shape the life to the form that I want it to be.
Yeah, no, amazing, fantastic. Well, we've mentioned the EBU a few times, which is the European Blind Union. So maybe we might talk a little bit about how did you get involved in that initially, and rise to the exalted ranks of president as you are at the moment.
In the board. And how did I get involved in the first place? I was asked in 2019 if I was interested. So my the Finnish Federation of Visually Impaired, who's the member from Finland, they approached me and asked if I was interested, and I was. And then after the first 4 years in the board, came the General Assembly. And there was a nominations committee looking for candidates for the different positions, and I was nominated as a member. We had no nominations for president, which of course
yeah.
and just casually asked if willing to consider. I have not originally considered this. I still saw that my history with EBU was rather short, but also because the presidency typically does include quite a bit of traveling, and also the regional presidents are all officers of the World Blind Union, and that does require extensive travel in terms of two 7 to 9 day intercontinental trips a year. But then, as we didn't have too many candidates at that point, I told that, well, I'm interested in the presidency, but having a young child that I care for 60% of the time, I'm not able to travel that extensively, especially when I work externally full time, and I'm not working for the Finnish Federation. So then that gave me a bit of room for negotiation. So I ended up as the candidate for the presidency, and then our first vice president, Barbara Martin from Spain, was able to take a bigger role, replacing me in the international or the global fora. So that's made it possible. I would say that I've been following the international side of things for a long time, probably since I was very young, 10, 11 or so. I've been always into languages and really interested in intercultural activities, and that's how I ended up and also in the international activities of.
Fascinating. So it was kind of, as you say, meteoric rise, though, in sense of, as you say, you'd only been involved on the for a short time, and then suddenly, being board as president. But it's great to hear that the organisation was able to come up with ways to mean that it was possible for you to do the role, taking into account your other sort of responsibilities. So that's really encouraging, I think.
It's a challenge to find people who have both the capacity and especially the time for the international work. So I think the World Blind Union has similar challenges, that it's difficult to find people who are both qualified and able to commit the time, because there's usually, the best people are drawn to different directions, so everybody wants a piece of them. But it's also really an interesting opportunity. I really, really enjoy working with an international team. Both the staff team in Paris is very international, but then also the board. I think we're 13 from 13 different countries. And then we have 2 committee chairs that bring along, and additional countries are all.
Yeah. It's a huge organisation, isn't it? As you say, it's fantastic to have that sort of collaboration across all of those countries. And in terms of the work of the European Blind Union, it really is, I guess, to kind of further the independence and accessibility for people who are blind or vision impaired in Europe. Would that?
Yeah, in Europe, the focus has been for a long time on advocacy towards the European Union. But of course, we're 26 members from EU countries. Malta is currently the only EU country that is not represented in EBU. But then there's a whole bunch of members outside the European Union. We're 42 members all in all. So we've been looking into, also increasingly, since I became a president, we've been looking into OSCE, which is the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, because they have human rights work as well. And they've been working in terms of disability inclusion. They've been working in particular on accessibility to voting and into political life. And that's really interesting, because especially the voting aspect has been something the EBU has also been working on. People are interested in different ways of making voting procedures independent in different ways.
Yeah. That's a common factor that can, yes, it's universal, isn't it? And it's so important that people can kind of cast their vote independently. And it's something that, we're very focused on here. We obviously had a lot of elections last year, and, trying to find out how we have a voting template that can be used, but it's very cumbersome, and so a lot of people don't use it, and then also are relying on assistants to help them vote. And a lot of people are comfortable with that, but then many aren't, because it's having to trust that the person you're relying on is doing what you want. Yes, exactly. So it's trying to find that route. I mean, our system is quite complicated here. It's proportional representation, so our ballot papers can be feet long, with 20 or more candidates that you have to mark in order of preference. So it does pose challenges, but it's something that we're working to try to improve for people. But yeah, no. So there's lots of different interesting kind of campaigns and things that the European Blind Union has been involved in, and then I know just for our listeners, kind of to highlight some of those very briefly. But the Marrakesh Treaty about access to books in various formats has been a huge one, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the big things, and then another big piece that we've been working on and have already achieved results in European level, but are now pushing on the global level for the WBU, the World Blind Union, is the AVAS, the acoustic vehicle alarming system. So basically, silent electric cars are obliged to have this alarming system, so that when it's really rolling on low speed, there needs to be an alarm system on, so that people can actually hear the vehicles. And that's in place in the US, and that's in place in the EU, but on global level, that's not regulated. And there are discussions going on in the United Nations, and that's where our German member is very active, together with a US representative, pushing for our cause on the global scale. And then in the EU, what we're really, or EU or Europe, what we're looking into in terms of a new campaign launching probably next year, are accessible household appliances. Because we see a lot of rapid technological development where your stove turn into induction stoves, which have literally no buttons to push, and like there's no switch.
Yeah, it's the onslaught of sort of touch technology is really a downside for anyone with any sort of sight loss, isn't it? When you've got no buttons on anything, touch screens everywhere. Yes, it's always
not regulated currently, and we just got a reply a few weeks back. So in February we held a cocktail party or an event at the European Parliament for the new parliamentarians, sort of sharing our both successes, but then also our demands for the next term. And then some of us had sort of national level discussions with our national members of the European Parliament. And the Finnish MEP Maria Ohisalo then said that, well, this accessible household appliance after is so important that she would make a written question to the European Commission. So then Antoine Faube, who is our campaigning head in our Paris office, formulated that question, and we passed on to the MEP, who then asked it from the Commission. But unfortunately, the Commission then answered that they will not be pushing for any a directive on this, because on national level there is absolutely no legislation in EU member states on accessible household appliances and touch screens. And they see that their role is only to harmonize national legislation. So I think what we need to then do is that we need to start raising awareness that this really is a big challenge and making homes inaccessible increasingly to people with sight loss. And then once there is awareness, hopefully we could then produce some legislation on national level. And then if that legislation is different in different EU member states, then we could push for the EU to regulate this. So it's a long road.
Yeah.
But we have really skilled people who understand, the dynamics and how to push for change in the EU legislation. But then also there's a lot of work on standards. And the EU could possibly make the standard compulsory, but then the standard has to be good enough, and then in standardization work, it's a whole
other thing to have to do. So I guess in terms of, people listening in Ireland, I guess this is where the role of our advocacy here kind of plays such a vital role in terms of pushing for legislation locally, but then also because I know, the membership of the European Blind Union is kind of not on an individual level, but it's more on the various organisations representing people who are blind and vision impaired. So Vision Ireland is a member of the European Blind Union. So it's about us engaging with the work that you are doing in order to further things on a European level, which is so important. Well, there's a lot there. Sorry, go ahead.
So we have the member organizations. So this a single organization from each country, and we bring together the organizations and their expertise, and the sort of technical expertise is then structured through different working groups, such as a Braille working group or a digitalization working group or mobility working group. There's 6 of them all together. Those are mostly occupied by staff members or really, technical experts in terms of members of our member organizations.
Yeah.
But then we also have structures that are open for all blind and partially sighted people, regardless of their connection to any of the EU member organizations. And we call those forums. So there's basically there are email lists, and then people occasionally organize webinars or other activities. So we have 5 forums. There's one for older persons, which is meant for people over 60 years old to share experiences and ask for advice and sort of come together. Then there's a women and gender issues forum. There's a youth forum for people under 35. There's a low vision forum as well. And then a different one called the members exchange forum, I think, which is basically like a notice board that if you have an event that you'd like to share for a few weeks, I send a message on the members forum asking that could people share information on podcasts on visual impairment across Europe, because I find it interesting to listen in different languages from different corners of Europe. So it's really an exchange space for people on the grassroots level. So those all are.
They're all open. And if people want to find out about those, the best place to go is your website, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining with me today, Tytti. I mean, so much information and so interesting to hear about, your life and your journey towards, where you are now as a president of the European Blind Union. I think we're in safe hands, which is fantastic. So just to say, if anyone needs any support or services from Vision Ireland, you can email us you can look at our website at www.vi.ie or call our info line on 1800 911 250. And thank you so much for listening today. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Advocacy Talks. To get in touch with our advocacy team, send us an email to campaigns@vi.ie, or why not join one of our local advocacy networks, where you can work together with others to solve some of the biggest problems facing blind and partially sighted people in Ireland. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.